school, my workplace? What can I do?
Speak out against it. A lot of people can get used to the situation they're in, and therefore they see nothing that can be done about it. They seem oppressed and beaten down to the point they just throw their hands up and say, "I give up." So maybe you can be a voice for those that have just given up. You can stand up for your friends, family, anyone who is in that situation.
My name's Colleen, and I'm an upcoming junior. And I think that we
A
should.
little louder, a little louder.
Okay. Um, I think you need to call out the racist people. I think that's what you should start with. I think that's the most important thing because education, you need to educate them on what they did wrong.
I think, like I was saying earlier, I think one of the things we can start off with is, I'll tell you, from even being in, like, in medicine, I tell you, like, one of the things you're taught is that no matter what kind of person walks in the door, the person could have all these preconceived notions about you. They could have all the hatred towards you or your race or whatever it is, but you're taught to treat them as a human being regardless and show them compassion. By doing that, I mean, you're obviously doing it from a humanitarian perspective, but also it builds the person to show that, sometimes that it could show them in a sense that they are wrong, and whatever preconceived notions they had could be overwritten by showing them that sense of humanity. And from my own perspective, I've working in medical clinics and hospitals, you come across patients who are just like, they see you and they're like, what the hell? Like like they see a guy and they're like, what is this? And they, you can tell they have some judgment about your race or who you are. But when you kind of come past that and you show them that you're there to care for them regardless because of the position they're in, then they move past that. That's only, probably that's unique to the medical environment, but I think it could be extended to all walks of life if you just kind of, be the better person, be the person that shows them that whatever race you are, whatever you are, you're going to show the capabilities of the best person you can be, and people end up respecting into that. And it's a lot more complicated than that. I know sometimes it's hard. We put our emotions in the way. We put our own self, pride, and we kind of get, agitated if other people make us uncomfortable about ourselves. But I've realized more often than not, if you become comfortable in your own skin and, confident in yourself and not let other people's, thoughts or stereotypes about you affect you, then if we do that collectively, I feel like we can empower ourselves more.
Well said. Well said.
So,
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
I think as an individual, I feel like calling it out is one part, but also not defending racism is another big thing, because when you defend racism, then you just make it more commonplace, and it will continue to grow. Maybe it's non-intentional, maybe it is intentional, but I just feel like if someone is to call out racism, I feel as though you should be able to, as a third party, be able to observe the situation properly and call it racism as well, and not necessarily defend it, because when you defend it, then you're enabling racism and therefore empowering it. And so I feel, as an individual, if you go out of your way to also self-educate on other cultures and histories and backgrounds, so that way you have more of an understanding of who it is that you're actually talking to, or who the person is that you are dealing with personally, then I feel as though educating yourself properly, that removes the barrier of, oh, you're just some other person that already has, you can't be anything outside of what I already put you inside of.
Good.
I feel like that if you speak on it, then like the problem will be heard. But like if you feel like you're being offended because you feel like somebody's being racist, if you don't say anything, then they're not going to know that they're offending you, and if they don't know, then like the problem doesn't get fixed. So you can't just, because you don't want to be judged, you don't want to be like called like oversensitive or anything. You have to speak on it and let the problem be known so the problem can be fixed.
Nice.
May I get a quick rephrase of the?
Yes, the question was, what can I do as an individual to reduce racial tension in my community?
Okay. Well, I'm Thaddeus Breckenridge. I'm a going into my 4th year at Davidson Elkins College. So whenever I individually look at how I can help the uninformed or the misinformed, which is specifically what we're talking about when we talk about having any liberty or right to make any hate speech or any comment that goes against somebody's racial ethnic background. Specifically, like my brother Jordan said, it comes within self-educating, but it also comes into countering this conspiracy of keeping this racism inherent through systematic oppression. Meaning specifically in the conspiracy, you have two actors, the actor and you also have the passer. You have the father who beats the child, the active. The passive, the mother who turns her back while it's happening. There's two people into the conspiracy every time. We must be able to create within ourselves collectively a stable system, a social code of decoding and countering this conspiracy at every whim's cost of actors and passers both.
Preach.
I believe you should educate yourself and use that knowledge to educate others so everybody knows how to deal with racism and to bring racism down as much as possible in each community.
I believe that you should teach people that the stereotypes that's against all races aren't true, and that, like, let's say, like, if they said, oh, he's black, so he's a gangster or he sells drugs, like, if you speak out against that and tell them that it's not right, that it's wrong, and that we're more, like, the black race is more than just a hateful kind of thing, I feel like it'll help.
I believe that as far as the individual goes, you should always see something, say something. So if you see something bad, racist, what have you happening, then you should say something, whether it be to the person who is saying hateful things, or if you feel like it is not a good situation for you to be in, if you feel like it's dangerous, that you shouldn't try to counter the person, then you should go up to the person who got the thing said to them and say, like, hey, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm here for you.
As most people have already said, they have said to have a voice in the problem and speak out against it. And not only that, but don't try and force your beliefs and culture on someone else, because that's what makes them rebel even more. So, as in, like, the more you force something on someone, the more they're going to want to rebel against it and not have any other views on the situation. And to speak out against it, you can't just speak out as your opinion. You have to have knowledge of it. You have to be educated in a sense. Because if you're not, everything is opinion-based. And that's what causes riots and civil disobedience. And that's what causes a divide.
I, like many others here, am a firm believer in the balance between empathy and confrontation. So, as other people here have previously stated, there are different roles people can play while participating in systematic racism. You can have active participants, such as Nazi protesters, and you can have passive participants, such as the kids who laugh at the one joke in class that people make at the black kid. And I believe that while there is some form of ignorance and learning someone can do, in order to learn and be open, you have to be willing to listen. And there comes a point in every person who is outspokenly racist where you find that they are not willing to listen to you, and their sole purpose of talking to you and engaging with you is just to preach their message. And in those cases, and in most, I believe that you need to hold empathy for the individual and show that you are human and able to connect when they won't. But you also need to show that they're not there for you. They're not there to hear you. They are not here to listen to logic. They are here to preach hate. And when they do, you shut them down. This is not just speaking out against people. This is showing the rest of your classmates who might be open, who might be passive listeners, who are open to empathy, that there is no reason to laugh. There is no reason to participate. There is no reason to enable. If you are willing to enable in them, if you are willing to laugh at a joke that should not be laughed at and condemns hate, then you are a participant and you are just as guilty. And you should be able to take that on your conscience. You are no better, and you need to start listening.
Very good.
I believe that a possible fix to the racism that is very alive within our state and within our nation is simply just at the start the realization that there still is racism in this nation, and there still is racism in this state, and there still is racism in this community. I listened to a great podcast the other day by a professor at Rutgers University, and one of her statements really resonated with me. It's that between white communities and African American communities, there is a distinction, and that is the perception of time. Because to her, time is subjective between these two groups. To me, as a white person, time is completely linear. Meritocracy is great. You know, the American dream is alive. If I work hard, I can do great things. But to the African American community, they have to go back in history. They have to regress with every single wrongful conviction of someone due to race because of a broken justice system that gives harsher sentences to young African American males. And the same, regression in time occurs with videos posted of two white females saying the N-word and not having to face any punishment for it. And then as members of the African American community see that, that is a complete regression into a time of complete racism during the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, we need to start realizing that it is well and alive so that we can fix the problems that we are facing within this community, because ignoring its existence is the cause of the problem, in my opinion.
Well put.
This is going to be semi-regurgitation because I do agree with what has been said here. You have to recognize and speak out when you see something. You say to that individual, that's not okay. Especially if you have a position of power or some sort of privilege. You also have to listen in order to educate yourself and to recognize these things that you might not recognize otherwise. I might not recognize things that somebody who is a different skin color would recognize. You also have to listen to hate without giving it a platform, which I think was already very well stated.
My name is Micah. I'm a graduate from Woodrow Wilson, and I can agree too with what everybody has already said, as in self-education is the basis of how you can impact your community the best, because it's hard to establish an argument, a basis for your argument, if you don't have the knowledge behind it. So when defending your argument against racism, I think self-education is something you can do. And as overall, as like a society, people really need to have respect for others' cultures, and I think learning other people's history as well can help you with understanding where they come from, who they are, and things like that.
Good, very good.
So a lot of you mentioned with this question. You have one. Okay.
I think if we not only learn about other people's culture, but also learn why people hate other cultures, we can figure out a way to, it may be something simple that they didn't know. And if we educate them if we know why they hate other cultures, we can educate them on how to how to confront other cultures that they're not used to.
Just from listening from you all, it seems like your your idea of the best way of handling, or decreasing racial tensions, or, the different, between like the different racial and ethnic groups is education, whether it's just talking to somebody or listening to someone. And a couple of you mentioned different ways or different avenues that you have, I guess, kind of been proactive in actually doing this, learning about different cultures.
Testing, testing.
Can you hear me? So basically, my question is, I've heard different movies, different podcasts. What sort of things that you've either like read or seen or listened to that kind of goes along with this topic that we've had, whether it's about, like a podcast from a professor or a movie like The Hate You Give, or any books that you've probably read, maybe even like a YouTube video. What sort of, I guess, media outlets would you recommend to someone else that you feel needs to be educated on this stuff?
I can recall when the movie The Black Panther came out, and yeah, Wakanda. And it had the Marvel movies, they have a big cultural following. And in that movie, they talked about the actual Black Panther organization, the oppression that black people go through, and it generated a solution to that problem at the end of the movie. So I think things that have a big following, not necessarily a movie, but like certain podcasts, maybe certain TV shows that they can incorporate racial issues and racial problems and even come to a solution.
I think, to recommend specific podcasts and YouTube channels, I'd have like too many things to talk about. But I think in general, being like he was saying, the cultural perception of how certain races and religions and cultures are presented is a big thing in the media, because oftentimes we get confused the way Hollywood presents certain people or the way things are shown on the
Hold your mic a little closer.
Oh, okay. So, like you were saying in Black Panther, that became, that was the theme of the movie, sort of presented an empowerment amongst black people and kind of showed that, this heroic stance of him in the movie. And I think people got more appreciation from that. I think if, it takes kind of a movement if we can kind of push ourselves to, collectively, as a people, to get together and make more of our roles in society, in the sense like, making movies and making music and stuff that brings people together. Like I myself am a filmmaker, and I have a drone and I fly videos and I put music in the background and I travel to different places and I talk to different people. And I notice more often than not, I meet a wide range of different people, and I get like cultural facts and learn different things about those people. And when I put together a film, I'm basically putting different people's ideas together, and then I'm putting on top of that, I'm putting music in it or putting different narrations, and I make videos. And I either do that for companies or I do that for for my own pleasure. But basically, I realize like you can utilize and create ideas from that by just getting people together and putting it on social network like Instagram or YouTube or whatnot, and you can basically create your ideas if you get with enough people together of a certain race or whatnot, and you get together and make videos and kind of influence and show who you are as a people. And I've noticed that has a way of influencing people and getting your ideas across, because social media is way different than it was when I was in high school. That's one of the biggest advantages that I think you guys have now, is like you're really interconnected. It wasn't even like that when I graduated in 2012. I think Twitter just became a thing, but it's nowhere near in the past like 6-7 years, it's gotten, really big. And I think that's one of the ways that we can influence people's ideas if we get together. Because if you notice, the people who control certain parts of the media and they put out these things tend to be, it's just the way it is. It tends to be like, upper class white people, for that matter. You see less black voices, you see less brown voices, and it's getting a little bit better, but I noticed that there's a deficiency there, and that tends to skew people's presentation of the world. So if we kind of consider that and work on that, I think we can, influence people's ideas.
Good, good. Let's pause right there. We're at the 20-minute mark on this session.